And now we move on into Roman numeral 3, which is talking about judicial review. I just noticed that your outline, for some reason, Roman numeral 4 is not IV, but I no idea why it did that. I'm assuming Microsoft Word had a stroke. Not the point. Roman numeral 3 is where we are at in any case. Judicial review. Under history of jurisprudence, jurisprudence, for the record, first of all, defined as just the philosophy of law. Jurisprudence, again, by definition, simply means the philosophy of law. Jurisprudence, again, means the philosophy of law. What jurisprudence means, in a practical sense, is, again, what we thought the law was going to be and what the law was going to do, and so forth. When the Constitution was created, remember, the Supreme Court was the least dangerous branch. And the Article 3 of the Constitution that talks about the courts is really vague and, frankly, not even there. It's like 2 paragraphs. I can only conclude it's because they got tired of arguing about it and just gave up. And really, that's not that far from the truth. They assumed that Congress, a future Congress, would solve this question for them. And Congress kind of did with the Judiciary Act of 1789. In this law, the Judiciary Act of 1789, they filled in the lower branches and so forth. But as for the Supreme Court was just sort of there as a legal advisor to the president. And that's really all there was to it. And that's probably all they would be if it wasn't for John Marshall. John Marshall was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That was, I think, the second or third one. He was not the first. The first was John Jay, who you might remember wrote part of the Federalist Papers and proved to be completely useless as a Supreme Court justice. Not the point. John Marshall became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the late 1700s, early 1800s, in that time period, and it's he who creates this concept of judicial review. Judicial review is the ability of the Supreme Court to overrule actions by the other 2 branches. Judicial review is the ability of the Supreme Court to overrule actions by the other 2 branches. Judicial review is the ability of the Supreme Court to overrule actions by the other 2 branches. Ha! You all know the word, sing along. Judicial review was not unique to John Marshall. It's not like he just woke up one morning and said, "Judicial review, I must have it." No, what happened? Judicial review was a concept that had already existed. It's just no one knew whether the Supreme Court actually had it or not, because it's not in the Constitution. It doesn't allow it, but it doesn't forbid it either. Some of the Founding Fathers liked the idea, and some of them didn't. So again, it was always sort of in the back of people's minds, but it's Marshall who actually steps forward and grabs it. And he grabs it with the case of Marbury v. Madison. Marbury v. Madison is a horribly long and complicated set of chaotic affairs, but the short version is Thomas Jefferson beat John Adams in an election. John Adams is a bitter, bitter troll. And John Adams spends the last few hours of his presidency giving out jobs to as many people as he can so that Jefferson can't give out jobs. One of the people he tries to give the jobs to, Adams tries to give a job to, is Marbury. Marbury wanted to be, I forget, it's like Justice of the Peace of Washington, D.C. or something minor. When Jefferson becomes president, Jefferson refuses to go along with this plan, saying, well, he's not president anymore. I don't have to give out these jobs. It's stupid. Marbury sues on the grounds that he wants the job, and so he sues. It comes to John Marshall as basically a no-win situation. If he rules in favor of Jefferson, then it basically looks like he's rubber stamping everything. If he rules against Jefferson, Jefferson's just going to ignore him, weakening the court's stature. Instead, what he basically does is said it's a moot point. The law that allowed him to make these appointments was invalid. And so because Adams never had the ability in the first place, Marbury's appointment doesn't count. So what he's saying is not whether or not the job itself was acceptable, whether or not that is. He was saying that the law that gave this job out itself was invalid. It was a genius move. And this gives the Supreme Court its biggest weapon, which is judicial review. Judicial review is, again, the ability of Congress to tell the President or Congress, Supreme Court can tell the President or Congress, you can't do that, that's impossible, etc. Now, the cry that came out, of course, is that, you're letting unelected judges or justices, to use the correct terminology, you're using unelected justices to exercise their judgment over the people's. And the response has always been, from John Marshall's point of view, that no, because the justices are only interpreting the Constitution, and the public, of course, creates the Constitution through amendments and so forth. So really, all the Supreme Court is doing is exercising the public's judgment over the President and Congress. Therefore, it's not the Supreme Court that's supreme, but rather the public and the Constitution. At least in theory. That's how this idea was sold, and why it was acceptable that, again, a group of unelected judges actually, get to do it. So again, this would be going under significance. Without judicial review, the Supreme Court is little more than just an advisory role. So the significance of judicial review is it is why the Supreme Court is an actually effective group. So again, short, sweet, to the point. We move on now in Roman numeral 4, the dual court system.